You're listening to Straight to the Point, Uncut. Welcome to the latest edition of Straight to the Point, Uncut with myself, Ciaran Gibbons. You can follow us on Twitter at STTP Uncut. You can like our Facebook page and you can subscribe to us on YouTube. I'm delighted to be joined today by Tom Navin, a veteran of the Falklands conflict between Britain and Argentina in 1982. Tom was on the Sir Galahad ship, which was attacked by Argentinian forces, leading to the loss of, I think it was 56 British servicemen, the largest loss of life for any British military forces since World War II. So with that in mind, Tom, I'd just like to thank you for your personal courage to kind of talk about this. I know it's a very traumatic event, and I'm sure all our listeners and viewers appreciate the courage you were showing by talking about it. But the reason I asked you to talk about it is because I think it's important that, it's almost 40 years now since the Falklands conflict. I think it's important we remember what happened in that conflict and the sacrifices made by the British servicemen and, of course, the Argentinians as well. And I think it's important we just remember what happened back then. So, Tom, prior to the Falklands, the war taking place, I mean, what were you doing? I presume you were in the army.
Yeah, I joined up at 17. I was on yacht schemes, £23.50 a week type things, and so I tried for the army when I was 16, but there was no place at the time, so I waited, and then with 17 and a half, I reapplied, and I was accepted and went into training in, I think it was October, November 81, when I was 17. And before that really it was just a lot of unemployment in the area I live in, so there was sort of no future unless we went into the forces. Yeah.
So where were you living at the time, Tom?
In Winsford in Cheshire at the time, yeah. I was sort of like sort of semi-homeless really at the time. Things had gone on at home, not to do, no problem with my family, the problem probably with me, So I made the choice that I needed to get my life sorted out, and then joined up.
So what regiment or corps did you join when you joined the army?
When I went to the recruitment centre, I didn't really have a regiment. Or my dad had always said, my dad was an ex-Lancashire Fusilier, and he said to me, "Don't go into the infantry, go into a corps." So when I did my tests and went to the office, they had different time limits for different regiments and corps. So the nearest one that I could get in was the Royal Army Medical Corps, which I could join, I think it was a few weeks later after I'd been to the recruitment office. So that's what I did. I just thought, yeah, that'll do. I'll get on with my life.
So what training did you receive from the Army Medical Corps?
I applied for a combat medical technician when I joined up, and that when I went to the RAMC, that's the training I did for a combat medical technician, which are usually attached to regiments and different units, working on it. Anything really medical, but mainly sort of frontline stuff and that type of thing.
Okay, so I'm just going to remind people, if they need reminding, of just the timeline leading up to the Falklands conflict. April 2nd, the islands were invaded by Argentinian forces, and the British government promptly sent a task force south. On May 2nd, HMS Conqueror sunk the Argentinian ship, the Belgrano. May 4th, HMS Sheffield was struck by an Exet missile, and also a Sea Harrier was shot down over Goose Green. May 21st, British forces land on San Carlos waters. May 28th, the Tupara attacked Goose Green, and then 8th of June was the Sir Galahad attacking, which of course you were involved in.
Yeah.
When did you first hear of the Falklands?
I'd just come out of training, and I'd been posted to 16th Field Ambulance in Aldershot. The unit was mainly ace mobile forces. We had a parachute element to it as well, parachute clearance troop, and then we had sections. I was posted to the unit, and at the time I was put in the main dressing station, which was part of the unit. When I got there, I think I was only there probably a week or two, and then the hostilities started. And we thought it was Scotland at first, and no one knew where it was. Like, oh wow, what's going on in Scotland? So the unit really was, when I got there, it wasn't really a functioning unit. Everyone was getting ready for deployment, as you know, that type of thing. So I was I got my kit, got my bed space, and everyone was starting to disappear, getting the kit to disappear, getting ready to disappear from the unit. So it was sort of hard fitting in at first. It was just me and another guy, Jeff Pugh, that we'd been in training together. So we sort of like just stuck together, really. Yeah. Mm.
So you weren't in your unit very long before the deployment for the Falklands started?
No, and we were actually rear party at the beginning, when it all kicked off, and so we thought we weren't going to be going out at all, to be honest. But me and another guy, Scouts Farrelly and Farrell, we were sort of mithering to going down the offices. We want to go as it's like being a young squaddy, and you don't just out of training, and you don't really understand the real, what really is going to happen when you go to war. So it's just an adventure, really. Yeah.
What was the general feeling amongst yourselves and the other troops? I know you mentioned there was a bit of excitement there, a bit of anticipation.
Yeah, I think we were probably a bit fed up, really, because we thought we were going to be the rear party. So, and everybody else was going down Solomon, buying kit, and, getting ready for it. And it was quite a high, really. I suppose that's what people train for when, that's the excitement. We want to go, we want to do our job, what we trained for. Yeah. So, everyone else was excited. We were a bit fed up, really. We were thinking that we were going to be rear party. Yeah.
At what point was it that that you realised that you were actually going to be going south to the Falklands as well?
Well, the rest of the unit set off on the QE2, I think, from Southampton. We were rear party, so we were just doing guard duties. And like I say, me and Ian, we used to go down the office, mithering. He was a storeman, Ian. So they kept saying, no, we're rear party. Then one day they said, right, we're going to have a meeting, and Roger Nutbeam, Major Roger Nutbeam, held the meeting, and his wife was also there, Tricia, and they informed us that we were going to go. We'd be flying out to Ascension, and we'd be meeting up with the QE2 and going to the Falklands. So we were just really happy. So then we had disembarkation leave. So I travelled home with Scouts on the train. Obviously, he's from Liverpool, and there's a couple of stops up from where I live. And we were really excited talking about it. He was really excited. So we had to leave. And then when we were on the leave, we got the phone call, Mons, which meant, get back to camp as quick as possible. And so then we all met up back at camp, ready for disembarkation, or embarkation, should say.
what were you expecting? Were you expecting it to get to actual conflict of fighting, or were you thinking at this time it was the Argentinians were going to withdraw, or were you just young and naive and had no real idea what was going to happen?
Both really. I was young and naive, but we also sort of in the back of your head you think, oh, is this really going to happen? Oh, it was. It did. Yeah.
At what point did the conflict become real, or did the atmosphere change amongst the British forces? Because as I read the timeline out there, you can slowly see things escalating slowly between obviously the Belgrano getting sunk and HMS Sheffield, and then there was several bombings by the RAF on the Falklands themselves.
I think it got real when we were on the QE2, and we were getting towards South Georgia. We were doing a lot of training, medical training, weapons training. So obviously being a medic, you've got to be able to clear the weapons that are coming in with the casualties, etc. I think really it sort of got real on the way there. Ascension as well. There was so much equipment, and I was actually on the baggage party, so I was loading and unloading. So you sort of felt real then, as you know from being in the forces yourself. It's once the war machine starts moving and working, and you're part of it. You know something's going to happen at the end of it. It's inevitable, really, isn't it?
And as a medic, did you feel particular pressure on yourself? Did you feel you were adequately trained for what was about to come?
Yeah, I felt that I could, as a basic combat medic, I could follow orders, and we have quite stringent training. A Class 1 combat medic is probably more highly trained than an NHS paramedic, which I also ended up being in the end. But yeah, it's as you know, the army training is the best. Yeah.
And when the conflict started to heat up, and like I said, the Belgrano was sunk, and then HMS Sheffield, what was the mood amongst the British forces in general? Was there an attitude that they would just go and get the job done at this stage, or was there? What was the feeling?
I think really, even before then, you sort of knew when the South Georgia episode happened. That was sort of when it hit home, with the special forces and the helicopter crash in South Georgia. I think that sort of awakened feelings of this is happening. And when we arrived there at South Georgia before we prospect onto the ship to take us to the Falklands, I think that was. I remember a lad saying to me, he says that story. He says, "Tom, you've got to accept Christ the Lord, or you're not coming back from this." And I was like, anyway, I was a bit curt with the lad and said, but that was sort of when it struck home, because then someone's just mentioned God and death, and that was quite unnerving at the time.
Yes. So just were there any experienced guys who'd been in conflicts? I know Northern Ireland, of course, had been going on for 10, 12, 13 years at that point. But was there any guys who'd had combat experience in your regiment, or the guys in amongst you?
Yes, I think some of the senior NCOs have been to different wars and conflicts around the world, and some of them were really good. Explaining stuff, and during the training on the QE2, we had some really good instructors from the Royal Marines, the Parachute Regiment, and different corps, explaining what's going to happen, what we need to do as medics. So the instruction on the QE2 was really good. Really, it sort of got us ready for it, and it showed us the topography of the islands, and it sort of said it's like the moors, which I'm not far from, so I sort of knew what to expect on the ground.
So as you made your way further south from the Ascension Islands, what ship were you travelling on at that point?
I was on the QE2. I got choppered from Ascension and winched down onto a small boat, an naval boat, and then we got took to the QE2, and then we boarded the QE2, and then it was a QE2 all the way to South Georgia, and I think it was the Norland from South Georgia to the Falklands. I'm pretty sure, yeah, long time ago.
And what was your instructions? What were your orders as you got closer to the islands and you knew you were going to be landing shortly?
Basically, I was part of the main dressing station, and being a private and brand new, you're sort of like at the bottom of, you didn't really get the best info and intelligence. You were just part of the unit and a small cog in the works to just carry on doing assisting casualties, and if you got attached to a regiment or a corps or a unit, then that was it. But at the time, we were all just part of the main dressing station until we actually landed.
So basically, your orders were to land and then set up a dressing station, like a medical point to deal with any casualties.
Yeah, I think that's it exactly. Yeah. Where we didn't know, we hadn't been given information really. Well, I hadn't. Obviously, the senior NGOs may have, but I wasn't really given a lot of information about where we were going and what we'd actually be doing at the time. Like I say, I was quite new.
And really, you literally went straight from training then to a conflict zone.
A couple of weeks. Yeah, really. Yeah, probably about 3 weeks, 4 weeks, something like that, before I went to the conflict zone. So it was better really, because coming straight out of training, you sort of expect to do that, because that's how they make you feel when you're in training. You do all the exercises and it's just.
So as you were getting closer to the Falklands Island itself, what was the mood like amongst the British forces? Was the mood changing as you got closer when the main British landings took place?
Yeah, people were becoming more quiet. People were checking kit. People were doing things what you'd probably do in basic training that you've probably not done for quite a while, really. So, yeah, and then, like I say, the mood did change. It did just become a lot more solemn, and people just wanted to get in there and get the job done. And I think people were thinking about each other, and obviously being squaddies together, you just think, you've got to look after each other. If you don't, things will go south. Mm-hmm.
And of course, humour is an amazing thing to get you through stressful times. What was it like? I can imagine some of the banter, the word we use these days, but the banter amongst the British forces as you're making your way south. Yeah,
there was some sick banter and some fun on the boat. I enjoyed watching, getting involved with the Royal Marines and different things, and the toga parties and stuff, and crossing the line. And it's actually, I didn't do that on the way down. I did that on the way back on Uganda, because I was coming to Ascension. But things like that. But yeah, there was a lot of banter and fun and camaraderie, and it was funny really, because it was the only time really when you felt that all the forces, Navy, Army, Air Force, we were all one. Whereas when after the Falklands, everybody sort of split up into their own directions again, which was a shame really, because I ended up being part of a Royal Marine unit in the Falklands, a Red and Green Light Machine. So it was a shame really when we all got split up afterwards, because obviously it's in wartime, everyone sort of comes together, and there's banter, but there's no nastiness or vindictiveness. It's just
I think in peacetime the British forces fight amongst themselves, and then obviously in war they fight a common enemy.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, there's always that competition, isn't there? But yeah, during wartime that just disappears. But you're just one massive unit, which is nice. Even though a few things down there happened because of lack of communication between the army, the navy. Hopefully, I would have hoped that things like that would have been sorted out since.
At what point did you become aware of the Argentinian Air Force? I mean, did you see, or were they attacking you as you made your way south? Were you on any of the ships that were attacked on the way previous to the main incident?
No, there was no we didn't see any aircraft. Mostly that would have been the Navy lads, because they were really in the thick of it at the beginning, to be honest. They saw action before any of us did. And to be honest, they were in a more dangerous position. At least we could dig holes. But I think the first time they sort of hit home, I was sat in the latrine, and I saw the bow of a ship go down, got an air raid warning, and I was sat in the latrine in San Carlos, and the front of the ship went down, and a missile came up. We saw the missile go up into the sky, and then it just disappeared slightly and turned left. Anyway, the next thing, nothing happened for, I don't know, seconds, minutes. I can't remember exactly, but the next thing, there was just massive amounts of flashes and lights in the sky. Then there was just after that, there was massive bangs, and the first thing I thought was, somebody's on that, or somebody was on that, and then all I could think about was people just dying in front of me, being a young lad, and I think that was when really it sort of come home. Then, wow, this is serious stuff.
At what point were you told, given your orders, that you're going to be landing on, boarding the Sir Galahad to actually land on the Falklands?
I think initially we weren't going on ship. We were heading to the mountains outside Stanley. I don't know how they were going to move us there. Obviously, I was pretty badly informed, being one of the new guys. And then we got told that I was, when we were in the camp in San Carlos, we watched all the Welsh Guards come in. And they started moving into the hills and getting ready in defensive positions. So, sorry, I've lost the question a little bit there, Ciaran.
No, I was just saying, when did you receive the orders, or when were you informed that you're going to be boarding the Sir Galahad so were you already on the Falklands and you were moved to another position, is that right?
Yeah,
okay.
We saw the Welsh Guards march out, and they had a lot of kit. They had far more kit than the parachute regiment, and they had far more kit than the Marines. We saw them march out of our positions. And then I think it was the next day, we got told that we were going to get moved onto the Galahad, and that the Welsh Guards had been called back, and that they were going to also go onto the Galahad.
So you'd previously already landed on the Falklands?
Yeah, we'd been there for quite a while. Yeah. We've been there for. We were all. It was just pure mud, and I was just stagging on. I was stagging on in gun trenches. Sorry.
Yeah, so who did you land with? Which forces or brigade were you attached to?
We moved in as a unit. We came on landing craft and actually came in. There was some parachute regiment already there in defensive positions. So when we got there, we were just stagging on with them. Obviously, there was no medical work to do. So I remember I think it was the first night I was on a GPMG with a guy from, I think it was 3 Power, and he said, "Be careful tonight, son." He said, "We've got helicopters coming over that mountain there," and I was like, "Oh yeah." So I stood on the gun all night, and he just slept. Obviously, knew what he was doing.
Yeah. Taking advantage of the new guy.
Definitely. Yeah. He must have just been laughing at me. Yeah. So,
Yeah, so you mentioned there the Welsh Guards landed, and then they were ordered to reboard the Sir Galahad, and you were told to move with them.
yeah, we got put on the ship. The Welsh Guards got put on the ship. With all their equipment, it's a lot of equipment. So we boarded the ship with all our equipment as well, to move, obviously, to Fitzroy. You say Blockclove, but it was actually Fitzroy.
And how far away was that from your location you were at?
It was just overnight. I would imagine it's about 30 kilometres, something like 40 kilometres maybe. I'm not sure.
So as a young soldier, you'd have been probably 18 at that point, I guess, Will?
I was 8, yeah.
Yeah, so as a young 18-year-old, straight from training, you're in a war zone. People have already lost their lives on both sides. I mean, what are you thinking at this point?
We started to hear a lot about ships being blown up, and it wasn't nice listening to seeing the death and hearing about the death. But at this point, we weren't really in the middle of it at the time. We'd seen a lot of the air raid warnings and planes coming in at San Carlos, and and a lot of the naval ships were out in the bay, very close to land, actually, probably too close to them. And yeah, it made you think a little bit. Even with your training, we think, it's.
And at this point, were the Argentinian Air Force coming in, attacking the British ships?
Yeah, we were getting a lot. There was a lot of air raids coming in. We were getting the air raid warnings. I think a lot of it had actually happened before our arrival, even though it was still happening. And some of the naval ships had took a lot of income and a lot of damage, which was sadly.
So you're on the Sir Galahad, making your way around to Fitzroy.
Yeah.
Do you want to just tell us what happened next?
Yeah. Do you mean about just what happened on the way there, or what?
Yeah. Just what happened. Yeah.
I was on the ship, and it was just, to be honest with you, I was a little bit in awe because we were watching the guards getting. They were using we used can cream. They were using burnt cork. Some of the old sweats were using burnt cork and stuff, and they were checking their kit, and it was just all the time people were checking the lines for the toilets was the most amazing thing, because we'd all been on compo. Everyone was bummed up, and you can imagine what that thing was like. But I was quite enthralled just watching the guards and seeing how they were getting ready for war. And they were all. No one was really talking. Everyone was just focused on what their jobs were. Which was a bit of an eye opener, really. Because you knew that something big was going to happen. Obviously, it did.
Yeah. One thing you just touched on a point there, which I didn't really think of until you mentioned it. These days, youngsters may be watching this interview, and the day of the internet, and information is just literally on a mobile phone in front of you, even if it's just information passed amongst yourselves. But of course, at the time of the Falklands War, of course, there was no internet. There was very few reporters there, so there was probably very little information amongst soldiers on the front line like yourself.
Yeah, that's right. Like I say, I was new, so I was sort of at the bottom of the list for any information. So, you couldn't ring home. There was no internet. You didn't know what was that. The only thing you did hear really was when you got briefings about, what ships had been hit, injuries on the ships. But, you sort of, to be honest with you, you sort of tried to put that out of your mind. You didn't really want to think about that too much. It's not the best, not the best thing to do. You just sort of concentrate on what we're going to do, and.
And I don't know if it affected you or you were aware of it at the time, but the BBC, I don't know how the right way to word it, but they announced that Two Para were going to launch an assault on Goose Green prior to the assault. Was that something that you were aware of at the time?
We did it, yeah. Things like that just come through the as you know, things like that come through the grapevine. And yeah, it was a little bit disturbing and a little bit worrying, to be honest, because there was a lot of other things going to be happening, obviously, with different regiments, the Scots Guards, the Welsh Guards, the Parachute Regiment, the Marines. So that type of information would help the Argentinian troops. That was quite a worrying prospect, to be honest. A lot of the lads weren't happy about that. Yeah.
And what was the relationship between the British task force at your level and the press? Did you have any relationship? I mean, did you see the press around, or?
The first time I saw the press was coming off the Galahad, and I saw them filming us. And I'd not really thought about it. I'd not really seen any press. Obviously, the press were knocking around with all the officers, no doubt, had good digs. Jeff and myself were putting an engine room on a QE2, so to sleep. So that wasn't much fun, but we didn't really have that type of contact. When I come off the Galahad, I looked on the side, and funny enough, because I'd survived, I was sort of like, I sort of felt a little bit elated, and I was sort of like, I felt like laughing. I don't know why, it was just nerves, no doubt. And I saw these cameras, and I thought, shit, I better stop laughing. It's, I'm getting filmed. I couldn't believe they were there, really. I thought, have they got there before us? It's strange, yeah. Mm. Yeah, and they were all on the beach watching. It felt a bit sick, to be honest, because somebody filming people, dying on and shit burning, and it just felt a bit disrespectful. Obviously, I know better now that it's important for historical reasons, but at the time, I found it a little bit disturbing.
So Tuesday, 8th of June, you were on the Sir Galahad making your way to Fitzroy. Do you want to just tell us what's your memories?
We docked early morning. I think it was about 7 o'clock in the morning. We were down there, and we were just on the ship and just writing letters. I was where the tank deck is, that actually got hit, where the bombs went, the mortar platoon were. We were in accommodation to the side of that. We were just writing letters. I remember Jeff coming saying, "Are you coming upstairs, Tom? There's a film on." And at the time, I was just writing a letter, so I was like, "No, I'm just going to write home." I was writing to a friend in Winsford. So Jeff didn't. I don't think Jeff went either. I'm not 100%, but I think he didn't bother. So it was a porno film. He coming up to us, obviously. Yeah. So I just carried on writing a letter, but there was a lot of grumbling on the ship, especially the older guys, the guards, that knew what was going on. They weren't happy because we'd been sat there for hours and hours, just docked. We took the majority of our unit and the equipment had gone. A lot of those new guys had been left on there, obviously surplus to requirements at the time, and the mortar platoon of the Welsh Guards were there. Well, some of them lads weren't happy. They knew what was going on. They knew what sitting duck was. I was quite naive, so I thought, well, this is all right. I've had a shower, I've had a shit, and I write my letters, and that's it. Typical, just basic study.
So how far from the shore were you at this point?
I would say we were about half a mile, something like a mile. Not awfully far. I didn't really go onto the decks. I sort of just stayed in my bunk because obviously we'd been sleeping in trenches and in bivvies, so it was quite nice just to have a bunk to lie on and just relax. So I was just making the most of that, to be honest. And
had any soldiers or the people with the soldiers, had they been taken ashore at this point?
Yeah, a lot of the units have been taken ashore. I think there was only part of our unit, the ones had been left. Most of our unit was ashore, and most of the equipment. There was equipment left on the ship, and the mortar platoon of the Welsh Guards was still on the ship. So I don't know what percentage it got off the ship, but I think it was quite a large percentage that got off the ship. Yeah.
And you mentioned that some of the senior guys were getting annoyed, or that they were feeling that things were slowing down and they should be taken off the ship faster.
Oh yeah, 100%. Yeah, some of them guys had obviously been Ireland. They'd been in different war zones. They knew that we were a sitting duck. Personally, I didn't. I was too young and naive to realise that. But I heard all the grumblings, what's going on here? We shouldn't be sitting here with a sitting duck. And I just sort of tried to ignore it and sort of stayed out of the way, because mostly the talk was happening in certain areas. So I just took myself away in my little bunk and thought, I'm quite happy here for the moment.
Because at this point, I mean, several British ships had been already hit by the Argentinian Air Force, so it was something that people were already aware of. Yeah,
definitely. Yeah, especially people with experience of war zones. Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
So, at what point was the ship attacked by the Argentinian Air Force?
No, I think it was mid-morning, late morning, dinner time-ish, I think. I'm not 100%. It's not something I've really, you sort of avoid thinking about stuff like that, to be honest. It's not something you sort of think about, but yeah, it was about mid-morning. I was sitting there anyway. I had a big bong, that type of noise, and the whole ship just shook, and I mean really shook. And I sat there and I thought, and there was another big bong, and the ship shook again. And I think it was Jeff. I said to her, "We've been hit, Jeff." And then Jeff said, "No," he says, "Tom, he was older than me, Jeff, but his next mine rescue worker, Jeff, from Wales, Swansea, Pontanullis. And he was about 24 at the time, I think. So he was a lot more experienced with life. And I think he was trying to calm me anyway. "No," he said, "we've not been hit, Tom. Don't worry about it, we've not been hit." Anyway, we just sat there. I just thought, and the next thing, you just heard mayhem. It was like, "Oh, what's going on?" You heard a lot of banging and running. And so I got off my bunk, and then someone ran into the room and he shouted, "We've been hit." So everyone just started clearing out of the room. I'd just come out of training. So I thought, and the one thing in training is like, make sure you've got your weapon, make sure you've got the kit. So everyone ran out, and I thought, like, well, I'll get my web in. So I put my webbing on. I grabbed the SMG. And then I saw another one, funny enough, and I thought, I'll take that as well. I don't know why. Going to buy one at a time. So anyway, I took that, and then I walked through out of the door, turned right, and turned left. When I turned left, we walked up the corridor, and there was a massive hole. I'd never even been there. I didn't even know it was there on the ship. I'd not been to that part of the ship, and apparently the ship had been hit the day before. There was a massive hole, and you couldn't get through it. There was some steps a little bit further up, but it was hard to get to them steps. You'd have to run and jump to get onto them. So I thought, all right, let's go. So I thought, well, turn the other way. And then there were some guys with us that turned and walked the other way. So a few 20 yards maybe, went into the hole. There was a steel door going into the hole. So we opened the steel door to see if we could get through there. Anyway, the next thing, there was lads running at us, and their heads were on fire. They were on fire. There was rounds flying at us, explosions going on. So we moved out of the way for these guys to get past. These guys probably saved my life. We moved out of the way. These guys run past, and there was about 3 or 4 of them. But we looked in, and there was no one else was going to come out of there. It was just mayhem. It was just explosions and rounds coming at us. Let's take it on. Okay. So anyway, we followed these guys. that were on fire. They were smouldering by now. The flames had gone out. People had to, put stuff over the legs to cut the flames out. And these guys knew where they were going, so we clambered over this hole that I was talking about before. We went down the corridor. So, yeah.
Do you want to take a 2-minute break, Tom?
No, I'll just carry on. Okay, get it done. This is probably the. Anyway, so these guys jumped over. We jumped over this hole, grabbed over these steps, and it was just darkness. So we saw these guys scrabble up these where we've been hit before. So we scrabbled up, and it was quite hard getting back up onto the deck. A little bit hairy because it was just a massive hole with the sea below. And we managed to scrabble up the wreckage, and then when we come out on the deck, I felt quite relieved that I'd actually got out of there because I was in there for quite a while, really. I think your mind makes it look like you've not been there long, but I think we were there for quite a while trying to get out with the casualties. And so anyway, we got onto the deck. When I got onto the deck, I saw the regimental sergeant major Mac. He took control on the actual deck, the upper deck, and he had guys moving casualties, putting them into positions, getting ready for helicopter evacuation. There was a few guys from our unit up there, probably a couple of them had experience of quite a lot of casualty evacuation. So it started to work quite well. So I went over to Mac and I said, "Excuse me, sir, is there anything I can do?" And Mac said, "Yeah." He said, "Just stand over there at the bow." He said, "Just stay there." He said, "Don't move." He just said, "Just stay there." One, I think it was to keep us safe. And two, it was because he knew the helicopter were coming in and he was evacuating casualties to that position so we could put them onto helicopters, get them winched up. So anyway, when we got on the deck, I remember seeing, you ever see the picture where the guy's got his leg?
Yeah.
And the scratching's burning. And I remember he was coming up at just about the same time as I was when I went over to Mac, and I sort of looked and thought, wow, this is getting serious. A couple of our lads were actually going back in to the ship to pull casualties out. Which if you ever obviously have seen the film, it's quite hair raising. I think Jet may have been one of these, evacuating casualties from inside the ship. Anyway, the casualties started coming. They were all obviously burns and in a bad way. So we were just hooking them up on the winches and getting them mixed up onto the helicopters. And we were doing this for quite a while. I kept having a look back to see what was going on further down where Mac was controlling it all. It was just mayhem, really. But luckily, our unit, they did really well. I was, I'll always be proud to have been part of 16 Field. We must have saved a lot of lives on that ship.
I know it's a bit of a cliche that I guess used time and time again, but did your training take over? Did you almost just go into this mode that had been drilled into you?
100%. It was the only thing that did, just totally took over. You didn't. Once I remember looking over the side, I'm a really good swimmer. I thought, I'm safe now. It's going to be cold, but I have to. I don't mind. I'll jump over and swim for sure. So I was never scared of being actually on the ship. I was probably more scared of the ship sinking and sucking me down. A little thought went through my head. But obviously that never happened. So just crack on, isn't it, and do your job. But yeah, we've been trained that well. I mean, combat medics are trained really well. When we do our training, most of the staff have been in war zones, and so the training was just took over totally. Well, once we got on the deck.
And as a medic, were people looking to you, even though you'd only been in the army a very short period of time, and you were a private soldier? Were other guys looking to you for leadership, for help? Yeah,
definitely, because we didn't have, no one had berries on or anything. It was either a tin hat or nothing. No one knew who'd been there, how long they'd been a medic there. You're just a medic. And yeah, people do straight. Yeah, it was sort of like the real. It was the first time I'd actually done any medicing on about, for real, rather than just some exercises and that type of thing.
And how did you personally keep your composure, keep your discipline, keep yourself together mentally when all this horrific scene is happening around you?
I think I got confidence from other members of our unit and watching them working, and from the training, like we were saying before, the training just kicks in, and you're there to do a job, and this is your job. If I was an infantryman, I'd be on the front line, that'd be my job. But that was my job at the time. I'd been trained well, so it was just a matter of keeping your composure. And I felt more confident being on the deck, and not because of what I saw below decks and what I'd witnessed and been part of down there. I think being on top of the deck, just hooking people up to helicopters, was sort of, a lot easier than it's sort of, like I say, it's when you're in the forces, as you well know, you're taught to do a job. You just do that job and focus on that, nothing else. Yeah.
Was there any fear amongst you guys on the ship at this stage that you could be attacked again?
Yeah, unfortunately, yeah. But I didn't have time to think about that because we had a lot of casualties coming. They were in a mess, so it was just a case of getting them off the ship. When we were evacuating them, it just lasted for ages. We were on there a long time. In fact, in the end, I turned around at one point near the end and looked around, and there was hardly anyone there. There was only me and a guy called Nick Thresher. Nick was another combat medic, and probably one or two other medics. And we were getting the Chinese guys then that had been down in the bowels of the ship. I think maybe some of our guys had either got them out. I think there was a few of the Chinese lads that were actually leading search parties into the ship to try and get their friends and comrades out of there. So I turned around, there was sort of nobody else there. The ship was empty by then. So we just had the last casualties, which were the Chinese lads that were working on the ships.
Yeah, because that's something I think gets overlooked when the Falklands conflict is discussed, is the fact that a number of Chinese people travel south with the task force working on the ships. Yeah,
quite a few, yeah. Very brave men, yeah. And like I say, some of them were actually going back into the ships to save their friends and to save, obviously, squaddies that are still in there as well. Yeah.
How many people were of your medical unit were on the ship during this period?
There was a lot on the land. A lot have been taken onto the land. I would imagine there was probably Roger Nutbeam, Major Nutbeam, he died. Scouse Farrell I was talking about before, he was attached to the mortar platoon. He was killed with them on the tank there. Also Kenny Preston. I know Roger Nutbeam refused to leave the ship because he didn't want to leave us behind. He'd actually took us out there. So I think mainly it was like the guys that were on rear party in the UK. Most of the unit actually got off. They still had equipment on there. And as you know, how it all happened, or the reason we were on there so long was there was discussions on the land about whether to get the mortar platoon off first or whether to get the rest of the medical equipment off. And I know that there was a Royal Marine officer who was outranked by the two colonels who were arguing or discussing, and he wanted us all off. But I would imagine there was probably 20, 30 of us still on there. I guess I couldn't be 100% on that.
Yeah, I'm just thinking when I was probably in the army as well at 18, but it's a massive responsibility for a young soldier like yourself to be put in that position at such a young age, and to have all these casualties to try and help.
Yeah, and it was the first real casualties I'd come across. All the rest had been casualty simulation. So yeah. But I didn't really treat casualties at that time. It was more sort of evacuation of the casualties, and the treatment would be really just to try and help the burning. I didn't actually get to treat any till I'd actually got off the ship, and I was on a life raft, and we had quite a few Chinese lads on the life raft, and so we had to put dressings on them. We were going to give morphine, but Nick and myself were both class 3 medics, and with the helicopters winching them off straight away, I said to Nick about it, and we decided it'd be best to leave that, because if we give them morphine, it might cause other complications. So we just got them winched off, and we treated the burns, the best we could with dressings and any water we had. But a lot of our equipment anyway had been destroyed. Anything we carried was still in there. I lost all my kit. And I know all the lads in that, that were there, they lost their kit as well. So we were sort of working with very minimal equipment. All the dressings, the only equipment we had was actually on the life rafts. But when we were on the Galahad, obviously we had nothing. It was just a matter of evacuation.
And at what point were you evacuated from the Sir Galahad?
Well, when I looked round and there was no more casualties, and we had probably 3 or 4 or 5 Chinese lads, we got winched off, and then the Chinese lads that could manage to get down the rope ladders on the side of the ship, the emergency rope ladders, and into the life rafts. That's when we left the ship. There was no one else on the ship. We were sort of last off, so we got the Chinese lads to go first, so we could, one of us underneath, one on top, so we could sort of guide them down to the life rafts. And then we got into the life rafts, and then we started having as squaddies do. We start looking around and thinking, right, what can we use? What can I? As part of our training, isn't it? So we actually found medical aid kits and supplies, water supplies and stuff. So then it was a case of using the dressings and the water to try and help the burns. And during this time, helicopters were still coming in, so they were actually we were actually getting the Chinese lads and any other casualties we had. We were getting them lifted onto the choppers, and we were on the life raft there. And at the time, I thought, "Oh, great, we survived. This is great." But a little bit after that, we were on the far side of the ship, and the actual life raft started floating out and started coming back into the ship. So the next thing, we're covered in smoke, and you can hear the rounds going and the explosions, and we're getting sucked into the ship. And I just sort of like looked at each other and we thought, again, because I've thought this a few times that day, this is it. This is the end of it. We're going to be dead here. But luckily, the next thing, the chopper come down and used its rotors, and we just heard the draft, and you could feel the wind off the chopper. And it was just a saviour. It was like, wow, this is God come to save us. It was a chopper pilot, and he put his blades in and was pushing us out from the Galahad. I think you've probably seen it on the
yeah.
planes.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah.
What was your emotion when you finally got your feet back on dry land?
Well, after we got pushed away by the helicopter, we got on boats and come into dry land. And when I landed, the first thing I thought really was, where's Jack? So I was sort of like asking people where, I've seen Jack. He's the only guy really that I knew that well. So I was walking up the beach, and I met a young Royal Marine about my age. So we were just walking up, and we're quite happy we'd survived. Wow, yeah, survived. This guy says, "There's a second ship I've been blown up on." I was like, "What? It's a second ship?" We just both burst out laughing. I was like, "Oh God, no way!" Yeah. Poor bugger.
At what stage did your role or your job as a medic kick back in, dealing with the casualties on the land?
When I was on land, there was that most of our unit were on land beforehand, so they were all set up and ready. So really, I was by then I'd become probably one of the casualties. So we got moved into Fitzroy. I remember walking over the little bridge in Fitzroy, and when we got over the bridge, there was a few members of our unit. So there was Corporal Bill Riley. He sort of controlled us then. He was the corporal in charge. So we got into shell scrapes and bits of trenches and that. And we had weapons and that. I'm not sure if it was a weapon I had on the ship. Well, there's plenty of weapons about. So we were all just in a defensive position then. And the next thing, we saw planes coming over, fast planes, cars, I think, and they flew over us. So people started letting off at them. Then there was rounds coming from the mountains, and you could see the tracer coming, and it's sort of coming towards us, being fired at the planes, but obviously higher up. And the next thing, there was more planes coming in. Anyway, one of our guys started shooting at them planes. Another guy, just no names, no patrol, but just drops in and says, "There are fucking planes." None of us would have known anyway. Only the corporal that was in charge. He was pretty switched on, But war's mayhem, isn't it? It's it brings on these moments. But anyway, we were all on the floor laughing at that. Then that was you do. Unfortunately, a few times I laughed even after the bombing, but I don't know whether it's nerves or you just end up in strange situations, don't you?
Once the dust had settled and you'd realised you'd survived this horrific incident, what was the mood amongst the troops on how it happened, basically? What was the discussions? I mean, squaddies love to gossip and talk. What was the feeling amongst yourselves?
Yeah, not straight after. We didn't really. We got put in the big sheds with the Welsh Guards and any other casualties. I remember just being in there that night. It was so sad. Yeah, it was just there's guys there, and we lost the brothers. I mean, actual brothers and things. People had served with for years, and you're just so quiet in these sheds, and you hear a little bit of whimpering, and people. It was just soul destroying, really. We were just. No one had kit. Everybody was cold. It was absolutely freezing. Falklands, we were just in this big shed. Wasn't enough rations to go around, really. Didn't even get a brew. No one had brew kit. And it sort of dawned then what had happened, because till then it had been nervous excitement and fear and laughter, even daft things going on in your head. But now it was sort of just pure sad. It was just you've got all these guys and this massive hundreds of guys in this shed, and guys that I think being a young lad is at that age, when you see guys that are older than you and they're upset, it sort of dawns on you really what really has happened, and the human sort of side of things.
At what point did your senior NCOs and the officers start to basically get you all back on a war footing? Because even though you'd gone through this horrific incident and you'd survived, there was still a war to fight.
Yeah, well, what happened was we didn't know what was going to happen because we had no kit. So you thought, well, what are you going to do with us now? We've got no kit. It's cold. What's going to happen? So anyway, helicopters come in. So they came in with a Bell Huey, an Argentinian Bell Huey that had been captured, and they put us on that. I don't know what happened to a lot of the Welsh Guards. I think some of them went on to fight the war outside Stanley, but because the rear party again, the guys that I was with, we got took to the Peerless on these choppers on this Bell Huey. We got took to the Peerless. The pilot did a tactical flight, which is something I'll never forget. Amazing, yeah, very close to the ground and very fast, and yeah. And then I went onto the Peerless, which wasn't being blown up on a ship and again go onto another ship. It's not the best thing in the world. But anyway, we got onto this ship, and the Navy guys were brilliant. You know, they explained what it was all about. We didn't know what was going to happen then. So anyway, we got some scran. We got put into a cookhouse on there. We were all given scran. We were kept away from the main Navy guys. Obviously, they've got a lot of work to do. They don't mess around. And then, I think we got a shower. I'm not sure if we got a shower. And then we got fed. And that evening, we were just all on our bunks. And the next thing, you heard what had happened on the Galahad. It was just like a big bong. So anyway, all the lads just sort of like looked at each other and thought, we've been hit again. So everyone's sort of looking at each other, and we heard another bong. We're like, by then, we're like, oh no, not again. Anyway, a Navy guy popped his head and he said, don't worry, he said, it's just depth charges. You've not been hit. So everyone was like, oh, thank goodness for that, It wasn't so bad then. But then the next day, we got flown off the Peerless. The lads I was with, we got took to the red and green light machine with Rick Jolly to become part of their unit, which was nice to get back on land because I wouldn't want to be on a ship in the war, never.
In a strange sort of way, was it better for you to just be given a task straight away or as soon as possible after the incident, rather than being left just to your own, just left to think about things? Was that the best thing for you at the time?
Yeah, definitely, most definitely. You wouldn't want to be thinking about what happened, and we didn't get time to think anyway, because when we got to the red and green light machine, then we were getting ready for the attacks on London, and all the different attacks on Stanley and on the mountains, the Scotch Guards, the Marines. So we were then, they'd already taken all the Galahad casualties at the red and green light machine, so obviously I didn't deal with that. But then I think they were on like a war footing then, so they knew what was going to happen. They knew how the unit worked. They had confidence. So to be honest with you, they didn't know who was new and who. It was better for me really, because they actually sort of respected us more than their own unit type thing. They didn't know how new we were, how green we were. So we were sort of integrated into the unit quite well. We were given tasks. Everything was explained to what we had to do as the casualties come in. So, and to be honest with you, the way the red and green light machine worked, it's just a beautifully well-oiled machine. It was good being part of it. It was good being part of such an efficient working unit. Yeah.
At what stage did you have time to reflect on the Galahad incident and the massive loss of life and the traumatic incident you'd gone through?
That would have been after the war, when it finished. We never really, probably luckily, I would say luckily, lucky about getting blown up, but luckily, because we had to work so hard and we had a lot of casualties, you had to put what had happened to us to one side, because this was going to happen to other people now, and we had to be there to help them, save their lives, and support them. So that helped in a massive way, really, mentally. Mm. Yeah.
So once the conflict was complete, what was just a sense of relief, I suppose, amongst the servicemen, or was it a sense of sorrow?
It was when we found out the war was going to end. I remember Rick Jolly, and he just called us all in. The good thing I found about Rick Jolly and his unit, every single day and every single morning and evening, we would have an O group, and they would explain what had happened, casualties, what was coming in, what was going to happen. And I'd never really been given any of this type of information before when I was with my own unit, but the actual information we were given was much better. But when hostilities ceased, he called us in an O group, and he just said, "I'd just like to say that the war's finished. Obviously, it was a cessation of hostilities and not the end of the war, so we didn't know whether it finished, or whether this was just going to be, a sort of a lapse in the fighting. But when he told us, I think everyone was sort of happy. Yeah, wow, brilliant, it's over. Good. We'd all played our part. There was bombs in the back of the exploded bombs in the back of our unit and stuff like that. So it was nice to know it'd be over, and we wouldn't have to spend. What I did find it was a strange place, the Life Machine, because we had a lot of prisoners as well, a lot of Argentine prisoners, and that's the first time I come across Argentinian troops, which was very strange. And we had hundreds of them. They sort of lived in half of the Red and Green Life Machine. I mean, we actually had to sleep in the mortuary with our killed in action, which wasn't a very nice thing to do. But there was nowhere else to get your head down. And it was a cold place. But yeah, I think we were all really happy when it was over. I don't think it was one of these where people cheer and stuff like that. Just sort of like, thank goodness for that, or thank heck for that type thing. But yeah, it was a nice feeling. But even then, you didn't know if it was really over because it was only a cessation of hostilities. There was nothing signed at the time.
You mentioned the Argentinian POWs. What did you feel towards the Argentinians at that point? Bear in mind all that had gone on.
I was too young to feel malice. I sort of felt sorry for them, really. Some of them looked quite draggled. Their officers weren't very nice. We used to make the offer, well, I didn't, but the guards that we had, the Scotch guards that were guarding the prisoners, they used to make the officers empty the big, the big oil containers where they used to defecate. And they used to make the officers empty them and they get covered in shit and piss. That was like, for the young Argentinian squaddies, because some of them weren't treated very well. I used to chuck them sweets and stuff like that, being a young lad. And I used to just be mesmerised, just stand looking at them. In the daytime, they'd be outside, it depends. And in the night time, they'd be put inside the Life Machine. And I think it was just, I'd never really met foreign people by this time. I'd never flown, I'd never been abroad or anything like that. So it was just sort of like interesting to see what people were like. And then I remember some of the Argentinians, agua. At the time I didn't speak Spanish, I do now. At the time I didn't speak Spanish, so I was like, what did he keep saying that for? And in the end, one of the lads said, "Oh, we're after water." Oh, that's what it is. So we were able to give them water then. Yeah. We also had some Argentinian doctors helping us at one point to translate so we could treat the casualties, which was sort of like a combined effort, if you like, with the enemy, which was, probably only medics would see that.
I'm right in saying as well that it wasn't just British casualties you treated.
No, we treated many Argentinians, probably just almost as many as the British casualties, yeah. And we treated them just the same. There was no differential. Well, I do remember one time we had a guy from London, and he'd had his leg blown off, and we had him on a drip next to an Argentinian, and the silly thing to do was put, because people are still at war, and we put the stretchers next to an Argentinian, next to a British. Anyway, the next thing, mayhem kicked off, and the Paris 20 hit the poor Argentinian with a drip stand. He's got his arm. He's like, "Oh, get him." So anyway, then we learned to keep them apart. But yeah, we treated both. We treated them just as well. Yeah. There was no differentiating on the treatment.
How was the Falklands War and the incident with the Sir Galahad in particular? I mean, how has that affected you in the almost 40 years since then and now?
Yeah, things happened when I got sent back to the Falklands in '83, 6 months after the war. It was really disturbing. To be honest with you, you should never have done that. It's sort of like one of the gripes I had with the army. one of the reasons that I left the army sort of prematurely. I just thought they'd taken the mickey out of me, sending me back within 6 months. I even tried to injure myself on the way back there, to be honest, just so I didn't have to go again.
So sorry to interrupt you there, Tom. What was the reason for the army to send you back?
I haven't got a clue. They sent me back. I'd actually broken my leg on leave in the December, and then whether that was anything to do with it, because obviously being the type of, we were a spearhead unit, the same as your squadron, 9 Squadron 9. We were sort of the spearhead unit. So whether it's because the leg had been broken and I wasn't much used to them at the time, I don't know. I wouldn't like to say it was vindictiveness, but I'm sure someone in the unit must have thought, why send him back? But I spoke to, I won't mention names, but a corporal that was there, and many years later, and I said, "Have you ever been back, Bill?" And he said, "No." He said, "I'll never ever go back to the Falklands." So that's how disturbing it is. But it worked in my favour in the end, because during my next posting there, I got to know a lot of the Islanders, and I was still only 19 at the time, so I actually become friends with some of the younger Islanders, and it was probably the best thing that ever happened that I did get sent back, because mentally that, I think, helped me. But one thing that does sort of play on my mind is I never ever got to carry on with my future in the army. I then went on to the ambulance service, because after sending me back, I just thought, if that's what they think of me, I might as well just move on to other pastures and get on with my life.
Well, one of the questions I was going to ask you was how did the army and the MOD in general treat you and other veterans from the Falklands conflict? You've more or less answered it in that question. Is not very well in your case, at least.
There was others as well. The lads that were injured. I know quite a few of the lads that were injured. I had contact with a lot of lads that were down there from 2, 3 Pirate Guards, regiments, the Marines. I know a lot of the lads that were injured, they were just cast aside afterwards. I know that there was lads thrown out of the army for mental problems straight afterwards. Aldershot was a mess. Everyone was fighting, and then they started posting people out. There was our debrief was keep your mouth shut, because a few dodgy incidents happened, which I can't really go on mention on here, because we had the SID in the unit looking at different things that had happened, bad things. We were treated really badly. Really, there was no support. There was no support network mentally. It was quite upsetting. I hope that the army's moved on now. I hope it's not the same. But yeah, there was no support. It was just get on with it, and if you can't get on with it, either leave or get posted. And
I think I'm right in saying that veterans like yourself, and I know others, I know a few Falklands veterans, you've almost had to self-help, if you like, by forming your own organisations and groups, and you're almost you help each other.
We do on Twitter at the moment. I've got, there's a nice little support network, and I've not been on Twitter a long time, but that's sort of growing now. And if we can sort of weed from the chat out and support each other rather than people, not helping each other, I think that can work in a massively positive way. The best guy I ever had for mental health was, Alan Jones in Tai Gwyn. Dr. Alan Jones. He was brilliant. If it wasn't for him, I don't even think I'd be here now. He helped me, he helped my wife, Vic. And then after that, I moved on to Combat Stress, who at the time were really good. They said, we'll be here for the rest of your life, which they haven't been. They were for a while, for a few years, and then things changed. There's lots to do with money. But then we started having outreach groups. Brilliant. I love outreach. It's brilliant. But they stopped that due to funding at Combat Stress. We used to go to Chester Outreach. We used to have guys from Wales and England going there. There was about 30 of us. We supported each other. lads that get help with housing, they get help. I used to write letters for guys that run to court, or if they had problems, we'd all do things for each other. If there was guys, there was one guy in particular who was having real problems at X2 Barrett. Managed to get the regiment out to him. That helped no end. I worry about all these guys now, Ciaran, because how long ago was it when they stopped?
About 7 years.
It's about 7 years ago they stopped the outreach. Now these guys now, they're all probably, some of them probably sat in flats, depressed, with PTSD. Hopefully none of them have passed. But, you know, I worry about that because being a medic, I'd always be a medic for all them guys. That's my job. I still see it as my job to support people, but that stops. There's very little help now at the moment. The only help lads are getting, I think, is through self-help groups and getting in touch with you. But the amount of suicides, I mean, there's a lot more suicides happen than actually got killed in the Falklands. And I'm sure it's the same in other conflicts. And sadly, it's just not improving. It breaks my heart, to be honest, the way veteran help is heading. I mean, I'm not too bad. I've sorted myself out. But I know of plenty of people that haven't. And they're in a mess. And there's no real support. SAPA can be good. The British Legion can be good at times, but they usually just post you onto your regimental associations before. But I found SAPA can be helpful if you need help with housing and letters and stuff. So they're quite a positive group of people.
Are there any groups, or who would you advise somebody to see or try to seek out if they are suffering from mental stress or mental issues from the Falklands conflict?
We have a group called Summer 82. Unfortunately, they changed the format. We used to have like a website where we talk to each other and support each other. We also have things you can go to, you know, where we meet up and camping and caravanning and different dues and stuff like that. But to be honest with you, there's not a lot now that veterans can get help from unless it's people that they know. I think the Welsh Guards maybe have their own association that helps out with each other. I know the Parachute Regiment have the PRA, the Parachute Regiment Association, which can be helpful. But besides that, from the medical corps, really, we don't, being a corps, we don't have the same sort of, because we get posted out here, there and everywhere, as you probably know, being an engineer, you don't really have that regimental camaraderie that we, you know, the units do that. I don't know, I don't think there's a lot of help out there. They say go to your doctor, go to the NHS, but they really don't understand veterans affairs. And you can't be lumped in with civilian treatment. It just doesn't work like that. It's and another thing that I get frustrated with is calling things PTSD. We need another name for it, really, because PTSD now is just a general name for anyone that's got a mental problem from trauma. Or I'm not denigrating that. I know there's some really bad things happening in people's lives. But it's not the same as armed forces type PTSD. So it's all sort of got muddled up into a big grey area. It needs some direction, really. And you've got all these associations, the charities, and then you've got the guys at the top as well, earning hundreds and odd £1,000s. Nobody working in the charity should be making that money. There's no need for that. You know, people should be 30, 40 grand max. Why do you need to be earning that money? That money should be getting put back into the charity, not into people's pockets for personal use. I get quite sad with the way things have headed in the last 10 years, to be honest, Ciaran. It's gone south on it, really. I think.
Yeah.
That's my opinion.
Yeah, I think people perhaps set up charities with the good intentions and then for various different reasons, they get sidetracked and they forget why the charity was started in the beginning.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think a lot of ego. I've noticed on Twitter as well. There's a lot of egos in it, and no disrespect to ex-officers and stuff like that, but they always seem to want to take the lead and do it their way. But sometimes it'd be nice to listen to the guys who have the boots on the ground and see how they feel about things and how they feel it can move forward. They're more high profile. I think with us being, we're quite low profile. We're just boots on the ground, aren't we? Cannon fodder, I don't know what they call it. But to make a difference, you need to get to the bottom of the problem, and they're not getting to the bottom of the problem. Like I say, it's chief execs, paperwork. The money should go where it's needed: housing, on treatment for veterans with PTSD, on health groups, on outreach, things like this. It's simple. It's not hard. It's not difficult. It's all basic. But they complicate things, and when they complicate things, the only people that pay for it are the veterans, sadly.
From someone who was there on a grassroots, if you want to use that term, what lessons can the British Army and the British military learn from the Sir Galahad incident?
I think what they should learn straight away is cooperation between services. That was one of the main things. If the services were one, instead of, like we said before, this inter-service rivalry, get rid of that. That's not needed. Even unit rivalry, I don't agree with that. You see all this thing like special this, special that. We're all the same. None of us are different. I know that you've done some specialist things in your service, but I don't suppose you feel any different to someone who's not done.
No, maybe perhaps when you're young and stupid, you think different. But I think when you grow up and you look at it to the cold light of day, I think you look at things differently.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's but we need to help veterans. I mean, it's not just the Falklands. I mean, Afghanistan. Look at it. What them guys have been through. Northern Ireland, Banner. There's so many. And the funny thing is now most veterans have actually seen some sort of action in the service. So, I'm sure many are suffering now, and we're told to stiff up the lip. Man up, hate that, hate it. I saw a guy in the Falklands, a decorated soldier. He actually had a military medal for bravery. He got set beside of it at the grave, and someone told him to man up. He got upset because he'd seen his mate's grave.
Yeah.
He served when he'd been killed next to him. Man up. Bad words. People don't think.
Yeah.
Sorry, going on a little bit.
No, it's fine. No, you can. This is your open forum to say whatever you want to say, Tom. I don't know if there's anything else you want to add, Tom, but I'd just like to say just thank you for your time this morning. I appreciate that this is a really difficult and traumatic period of your life, particularly the Sir Galahad incident, and of course the whole conflict, and it's probably something I'm guessing you're never going to forget.
Yeah.
But I thought it was important just to talk about it, just to remember the guys who didn't come back from the Falklands. And no, it'll be 40 years next year from the Falklands conflict. And just to pay respect to those guys, really.
Yeah, we have Roger Nutbean. We keep in touch with his wife, Tricia, and his daughter, Catherine. My wife and I. We just Major Nutbean. He was a great guy. He'd come through the ranks, and he loved us. He actually loved the lads. Ian Farrell, Scouts. I travelled over on the train with him. Just like massively excited about going to the war. He wouldn't have wanted to be anywhere else. That's what happened to him. It was his choice. But great guy. Kenny Preston, lovely fella. One of them, gets all the kit. And he would have, I feel, being the way he was, he would have been more than happy to die for what he believed in. Yeah, but these people do need, to be remembered, along with all the others. 255, and not just that, the Argentinian as well. It's that's what we really do need to remember. We were the lucky ones. We come on. We've got families. We've got lives. These people never did, as you well know.
And have you returned to the Falklands? I think you mentioned you've been back to the Falklands since the conflict. Apart from when you returned back in 1983, have you been back since then?
Yeah, we went on the 30th anniversary, and when I went in '83, I actually lived with a family in the Falklands. Well, I went back with the Irish Rangers, attached to the Royal Irish Rangers, and then I went into Stanley, and I actually lived with a family there. And we went back on the 30th anniversary, my wife and myself, and we stayed with the grandchildren, the people that I lived with. Keith and T have passed now, but we stayed with Johnny and Judy Ford, lovely people and their family. Yeah, Sibby and Teddy Summers. So that was nice, and we got to go to all the places. It was quite emotional. I managed to get to the Life Machine and San Carlos. We went through all the battlefields where all the casualties were, and it was good. Mentally, I would advise any veterans of any conflict, if possible. I know it's not always possible, but to go back to the battlefield, and you do get a peace from it. And you can see what you fought for, and see the real people, and it's also good because you can go and pay respects to those that never did return, which is one of the nicest things, really, to be able to do that.
Okay. Once again, Tom, I just want to thank you so much for this morning. I'm sure everyone who watches this and listens to this will have learned something, and just I've got so much respect for you and all the rest of the British forces that went down to the South Atlantic in 1982, and of course the Argentinians as well. And just once again, thanks very much for your time this morning.
No problem, Ciaran. You're welcome.
This episode of Straight to the Point Uncut is dedicated to all the men who lost their lives in the Falklands conflict of 1982.